Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Smart, and I'm going to be going over a suggested approach for working teams that was developed by myself and two of our retired faculty, Dr. Leonard Mark and Dr. Marvin Dainoff. So the biggest question is whether they work or not. Why do we have to work in teams? It's become increasingly popular in education. Very popular in the work field. And the question is, why are we moving this method? And the short answer is that most modern problems and tasks are becoming complex. The things that we want to answer are becoming more and more detailed, have more and more things that are playing into them, have more factors that have to be addressed. Because of this, what we see is that a single person or a single researcher can no longer do this job on their own effectively. So what we require is the collaborative effort and skills of more than one agent, otherwise known as a team. So that center part right there is now what we need to deal with the problems that we're interested in these times. However, I do understand, as much as this is important, as much as this is the way that things are going, that it's not always been the most optimal thing in the world. And most people have come to dread teamwork for a variety of reasons. But what we can realize is that many of those reasons were because no one's really taught how to work in teams. It's assumed that because we can talk to each other, that we can work together. And that's not the case. Working together takes work, it takes planning. And so what we did was develop a set of principles that we hope will help people plan for working in teams. So the first couple of things in preparing for working in a team is really needing to be honest about the strengths and weaknesses, both of yourself and of the people you're working with. So one of the things you want to ask is, what is your expertise? What is it that you're really good at? I heard a friend talk about it as, what is your superpower? What do you do really well? And then what is your kryptonite? That is, what are the things that really make it hard for you? What are the things you want to avoid at all cost? And knowing that can help you find people that can help sort of balance that out. So maybe you find someone that has that where your kryptonite is their superpower. To coin a phrase. So one of the things is, once you realize that, and there are several assessments out there that are free and on the web that you can kind of use to sort of work through that. But I have a feeling most people know what their strengths and weaknesses are. The other part of that is the first letter in the set of principles we're going to give you is this idea of communication is really important. So at an individual level, that means that everyone needs to be a communicator in some level. What we're looking for is what's called a T-shaped person as opposed to an I-shaped person. An I-shaped person has depth, but they don't have a means of sharing. A T-shaped person has a depth, but they also have the ability to reach out to other people. So you can have that expertise. That's perfectly fine. That's why we seek you out. But you also have to be able to share that expertise with others and also take in their perspectives as well. You find that both of those things are really necessary, and those are the kind of skills that you're really going to need to hone as you're moving through. So what we developed after looking at this and doing some research is the idea that we really need to come at teams from a principle-based approach. Not really a prescriptive approach in that we're going to tell you exactly how to do it, but things that we know are the common things that fall apart in teams. And to keep those in mind. So we developed this approach called the CARS approach, always an acronym that we'll talk about. The first part of CARS, the C part, is this idea of communication. And that's going to sound very cliche. It's going to sound, well, of course, communication, but it doesn't take away from its importance. You have to communicate. And the things that you need to communicate are what are the state of affairs in your particular group or project. So the goal for this, or the principle, is that everyone should be aware of what's going on and who's doing what. So you should know your role, you should know the other people's role, you should know what needs to get done, what's already been done. This sharing and collaborative communication starts at the brainstorming. That is, you need to sort of come up with ideas together. You can then break apart and research things in more depth, and then you come back and kind of share with the group. And for this to be effective, you really have to value the information perspectives, both that you give and that you receive. So a couple things that come out of this is, when you brainstorm, really give everyone a chance to have an input. Do not edit initially. Get as much as you can out there, and then you can break off. Once you have a good set of ideas, break off, find out a little bit more, and then come back and see where we are. And some of the tools that work really well for us are just in the way you phrase the conversations. So over here with the keys, over here you see a couple of phrases, how might we, and tell me more. These things tend to be more effective of keeping a conversation going. This is much better than I don't understand, or I don't get it, or that was dumb. All those sound terrible, and they immediately make people defensive. It takes away from the process. These types of questions keep the process flowing because there's no judgment there. Just is asking for clarification or asking how we might approach this if we take this idea up. So that tends to push things a little forward as we go through. The other thing that you might notice, and I'm going to kind of push this now a little visually, is that when you look at keys themselves, you see that they're both wide aspects and narrow aspects. These are the parts where people branch out and come back together. And as you know, for any key, that you need both aspects to get to the solution or get the door open. So I think it's a fitting kind of image to have as we go through. The next principle that you should always be aware of is accountability. And accountability is important because this, particularly for like class projects where grades are involved, this is always the sticking point where people are worried about, well, if this person slacks off, is that going to affect my grade? Setting up procedure for accountability can help stave that off. And there's several ways to do that. The general principle, though, is that there needs to be a system of checks and balances, and that ensures that everyone's participating and everybody knows what their role is. Now, whether they do that is a separate thing, but everyone knows from the onset what are the constraints of the particular team. One way to do this is keeping a journal of group activities and tasks performed individually. So maybe having a checklist. What was supposed to be done? Did this person do it? And that way, everyone can kind of be responsible for both themselves and keeping each other in the loop. This is also a great place for a team facilitator, someone whose role is to make sure that people are able to do the things that they need to do, which is different from a leader. This is a separate role, but having that person can help with this idea, and that way everyone is both aware of what's going on, everyone knows what they should be doing, and there's a way of tracking that. That's the second principle. The third principle is basically assigning responsibility and roles. That is, you have a team for a reason, that not everyone should be doing everything. You pick people because they have strengths, and you know that people have weaknesses. You pick other people to compensate for that. That's the whole point of having a team. So you want to have clear tasks for each member, and you want to value those tasks that you give people. So that's the key thing here. That's come up twice now. You always want to value the contributions because they're all necessary for the project to move forward as you go through. You want to avoid individual multitasking. Nothing kills a team faster than someone taking over other people's jobs. I know it's tempting when there's grades involved, but you want to avoid that. You want to give people a chance to use their strengths. So if you have someone that likes to talk or be the spokesperson, let them do that. If you have someone that likes to design things like a PowerPoint, let them do that. If you have someone that likes to design the analysis or the research, let them do that. And with the accountability part, those roles are clearly defined and also being kept track of. So even if that person's not standing up front, you know that person's contributed. And that takes some of the pressure off of having to do that as you go through. And then the last part has to do with procedural things. And this is really setting priorities. And depending on whether this is a longer project or a shorter project, I think this is still important. You want to set those kind of time goals. You want to look at both how long you have, what are the tasks that have to be done in that time period, what is the length of time that each piece should take, and try to really stick to that. And again, this is where a facilitator can come in handy when we might be spending too much time on a short-term goal rather than a long-term goal as you go through. So these four things are principles. They are things to look at while you're working in your team. They're not prescriptive in the sense I'm not going to tell you exactly how you achieve these. I'm just saying that you need to keep these in mind. And when you do, your team functions much better. The last thing that's really great about this approach, because it's not prescriptive, because it is just principles, is that it works across the board, whether you're doing a small casual group or whether you're doing a long-term team. As you can see in this graphic on the side, that was provided by Dr. Jennifer Quinn, also in our psychology department. And the CARS principles can really be applied to both size settings. I think the roles might be short-term or long-term, but the roles are the same. The accountability is the same. And the overall key is always to foster an environment that's inclusive as possible. You want to take advantage of the multiple perspectives and skills of the team members because that's why you're in that team. That's the strength of it. It's not that everybody's doing the same thing. It's not that everybody has the exact same perspective. It's that melding of perspectives, that diversity of thought that really makes for exciting solutions. So I hope this overview helps you think through the team process, maybe helps you think about them a little bit different light than you might have before. And happy teaming. Take care.